Hi everyone, I'm Lillian.
And I'm Felipe.
We are the Postmodern family.
We are Americans living in the UK, living a traditional family life.
We make 3 new videos every week, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So please hit that subscribe button if you're interested in our life as an American family, a traditional family, and commentating on British culture. We are going to react to, I don't know what we're doing actually. Today we're going to react to Churchill's Bodyguard, which is a series. It's episode 1, season 1, called Walter Meets Winston. Now, this was given to us as a suggestion by one of our commentators. So what I tend to do now is anytime someone puts a link in YouTube, then I'll copy it and I'll put it into our playlist, which is a suggestions playlist. And we're just gonna try and work through reacting to these things that you guys have recommended us to see. So that's what we're doing.
I am ex-Detective Inspector Walter Henry Thompson, and was Winston Churchill's bodyguard for a period of nearly 18 years.
Yeah.
In almost any piece of film you'll see of Britain's great wartime leader, this is the man in the background, anonymous and secret. Until now, his critical role in saving the life of Churchill from a series of attacks has been hidden from the wider public.
He himself intended that he would never be taken alive, and he issued direct instructions to me. I was to have his 4-5 Colt fully loaded. He intended to use every bullet but one on the enemy. The last one he saved for himself.
After the war, Walter Thompson's censored book told just part of the story. His full memoirs were suppressed even by Churchill himself. Only now can we recount the number of assassination attempts on Churchill's life, many foiled by Walter. This series, with unique access to these incredible memoirs, reveals for the first time the story of Walter's life with Winston. Together they traveled thousands of miles on precarious journeys to meet Stalin and Roosevelt and other world leaders. Together they rode with Lawrence of Arabia, dodged German assassins, were nearly shot down by enemy aircraft, lone gunmen, U-boats, and IRA hit. This is a story of the political upheavals of the 20th century. Churchill's constant brushes with death and the role played by an ex-post office messenger in preventing an early end to his life.
And with this weapon he was a dead shot. Anyone that came within range of this weapon would never survive.
Epic.
Before World War I, Britain was not always as peaceful as is often thought today. In January 1911, the streets of London rang with gunfire as police and soldiers besieged a gang of anarchists. Rare newsreel reveals how a bullet missed Winston Churchill's head by inches. In the crowd was Walter Thompson. He had no idea how this chance encounter would change his life. This first dangerous liaison set a course for 2 men of hugely contrasting backgrounds to spend almost 18 amazing years together. Sharing threats, some of which resonate even to this day, and which, as we reveal later, would bring them face to face with IRA men fighting for Irish Home Rule.
So how they meet for the first time. Cool.
Neither Walter Thompson nor Winston Churchill needed to be at Sydney Street in London's East End on that Monday afternoon in January 1911. But both were there, watching as the police besieged a gang of Latvian anarchists.
This footage.
It was soon apparent that the gang's Mauser automatic pistols were more than a match for the shotguns of the Metropolitan Police. So the youthful Home Secretary, 35-year-old Winston Churchill, agreed to the deployment of a platoon of Scots Guards.
Look at that. He's so classic. Even at 35.
He was unable to resist the temptation to go along himself. During the morning he arrived, resplendent in top hat and overcoat with a fine Astrakhan collar. It was a great photo opportunity for the ambitious young politician.
I need a
And
jacket.
by the evening, this film was being
I
shown
thought
in a
that like
movie
that.
theatre
You
in the
guys are
centre of
Ascot.
London.
So that looks like
Watching
Metropolitan
from
Police.
the appreciative
Where are
crowd
the
which had gathered
Scots
to enjoy
Guards?
the fun, Walter could not have even begun to anticipate how intimately his life and career would become involved with that of Churchill.
All those inside died in the fire. Before the billowing smoke filled the street and clouded my view, I got my first glimpse of Winston Churchill, the man whose safety was to become the dominating fact of my life. But he was in great danger at that moment. I watched agape as the man who was later to become my boss at Scotland Yard was shot at. Sir Patrick Quinn was standing behind Winston when a bullet from the gunman was fired through his hat. It was a near miss for Winston, who was well to the front.
That bullet could have killed Churchill in 1911. That time, Walter was powerless to protect him. But a decade later, the situation would be very different.
I had heard a great deal about him, much of which was inspired by his outspoken manner, which many people resented and to a degree disliked. This resentment,
That's the American in him.
influenced me, and without any real reason, I did not like him.
At this stage in their lives, there could not have been a greater contrast between the backgrounds of Winston and Walter. One, a member of one of the most influential and aristocratic families in the country, the other, of a solidly working-class background. Walter Thompson was
Working
born in
class is not even
1890
middle class,
in
right?
Brixton in South
Or was there
London.
no middle class then?
He was one
No, that
of
was a middle
13
class,
children.
but I think working class is lower than.
And his
middle
father,
class.
James Richard Thompson, was an insurance agent whose family had lived in South London for many years.
At the age of 8, I took a part-time job of cleaning windows and brasswork in a shop.
Amazing.
He then had to run the 3 miles to school so as not to be late.
This caused me to fall asleep in school. To make up for my educational loss, I went to night classes for French and shorthand after I began full-time work at the age of 14.
It was all very different from the early life of Winston Spencer Churchill. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was a brilliant orator and had enjoyed a brief but spectacular political career, becoming Chancellor of the Exchequer before dying at the age of 46 in 1895. Winston's father was always a distant figure, but the boy was devoted to his mother. Jenny was an
nice
American
oboe.
from the wealthy Jerome family and reputed to have American Indian blood in her veins.
Right.
One of the great beauties of Victorian society, she was friend of many of the leading figures in British life, including politicians, writers and artists. He showed himself courageous, even foolhardy, under fire, and a great lover of adventure and danger. In 1900, he had won a seat in Parliament as a Conservative. But in 1904,
Parliament.
the bumptious young MP caused a sensation when he crossed the floor to join the Liberal Party. His reward a year later was to become a junior minister, Under Secretary of State for the Colonies.
You can do that. You can just walk across. You know. I'm done.
In 1908, still 7 years before Walter Thompson first met Winston Churchill, the ambitious young politician gained both promotion and a wife. In April, he joined the cabinet as president of the Board of Trade. At 33, he was the youngest cabinet minister for more than a century, and obviously a rising star. The weekend of his promotion, Winston spent at his
Those
mother's
lips.
house. Clementine
Got
Hosier,
Botox.
with her mother as chaperone, was one of the guests. 4 months later, they were engaged.
She
And in
looks like his mother
September,
a little
as
bit.
Churchill himself wrote, I married and lived happily ever after.
Aw.
By this time, Walter was working in the rag trade in the East End of London. In 1911, he married Kate, who he met in the firm's typing pool.
This is before it was like customary to smile at photos.
He was a
right?
fit and athletic young man who had joined a physical culture club. Also played football for his company.
I was a good soccer
Can you
player,
do that?
and I was offered a chance to turn professional for the famous Arsenal football team.
Ooh.
But my mother, a strict Victorian with fixed ideas of what constituted a worthwhile career, refused to give her permission.
That's right.
Towards
Good
the end of
mom.
1910
What?
came the
She
event
refused to
which
let
was
him be a
change
player for
Walter's life
Arsenal.
forever.
She didn't think that was an acceptable profession.
In my lunch hour, I took a stroll along the Clerkenwell Road where there was a street market. By one of the barrows, I saw two men
He must have
attacking a
been
lone
old.
policeman. I grabbed one of the men. He backheeled me. I pushed his arm up his back and held on. The policeman was now blowing his whistle, and that sound brought other constables. I helped to get the man along to the police station. Without telling my mother, I applied to join London's Metropolitan Police. From about 70 who attended the medical examination, 10 of us were chosen.
Wow.
In addition to the anarchists and spies mentioned by Walter, Britain had its own protest movement, the Suffragettes. Determined to gain the vote for women,
can't shake
and
your head at
rebuffed
the
by a
Suffragettes.
male-dominated parliament,
Sure, I
the
can.
Suffragettes began using shock tactics, noisy demonstrations, chaining themselves to public buildings, and well-publicized hunger strikes to prove their seriousness. Walter soon got to know the leaders of the movement well.
Indeed, I have cursed them most heartily. Hour upon hour, I used to spend loitering outside the Suffragette HQ in Kingsway to report their comings and goings, and to trail them with a colleague. Once you start to trail a person, you have to go on till the quarry is safely ensconced for the night. So it can be a heartbreakingly unexciting business at times.
Just occasionally, there were compensations.
The funniest memory I have of the Suffragettes was when I was ordered to follow a certain enterprising young suffragette whose activities were then earning her some celebrity. She realized that she was being followed, and as it began to pour with rain, she looked round at me in an inquiring manner. So, sensing her difficulty, I walked beside her holding my umbrella over her, eventually escorting her home.
So what did you think?
Well, clearly it's going to be a long series because they're spending a lot of time on
We haven't
little
even got to
details.
where they met yet.
Yeah,
We're not
so it's
even
gonna
halfway
be
through this first episode.
it's going to be very, very thorough, which I like. No, it's really, really cool insight into that time period.
Yeah. I really like learning more about Churchill and his career and what people thought of him. Oh, and the idea of this whole suffragette thing. Why did you laugh or something? Or so everyone loves the suffragettes, I thought.
I don't know, do they? I was reading The Victorious Century. It's a book about 100 years of Great Britain between 1814 and 1911. It compares the expansion of the franchise. You know what I mean by
The
that?
franchise.
The franchise means the right to vote.
Okay.
Okay. It compares how the expansion of the franchise developed in other countries versus the UK. And it said something like, because UK's constitution was unwritten and because Parliament, that allowed Parliament to be flexible, Great Britain was relatively stable as it adopted these transitions, whereas other countries would have to do like an armed revolution, or because they had either a written constitution or no constitution whatsoever, so they had a dictator. So they either had to overthrow a dictator or violently fight it out with the people who wanted to uphold the written constitution. So I think different groups within society grow more powerful and more influential, and you can and that's just a natural progression, and so you can either grant them the power that their influence now merits, or you have to that violence has to ensue. So I think with the suffragettes, I think most men themselves became convinced that women needed the right to vote.
Yeah, well, a lot of women were working, and
so they had a big stake outside the house in the direction of the country. So I think it would have required violence to stop it. So from just a practical perspective, it was the right thing to do. From a how society ought to be ordered perspective, it's another question. If you're like us and we believe, you believe in a hierarchy of the household, and mom dealing with the affairs inside the home and dad dealing with the affairs outside the home, then it's a bit different, I think. That sort of society, which existed pre-early 20th century, the voting for the franchise was different, I think. Likewise, in early America, and Great Britain too, where it was property owners were the only ones who had the right to vote, because property owners had the biggest stake in government. As the middle class grew and more people became property owners, but like small houses, then of course they have a bigger stake, and so the franchise evolves, and it's only ever a growth. It doesn't ever seem to contract. So if you look at even Rome, where the franchise was quite limited initially in the Republic, then as they gobbled up more provinces, then they expanded the franchise. For the longest time, slaves couldn't have the franchise, and then they gave them the franchise, and so on. And then you had this phenomenon of having like Africans and Germans being emperors and things like that. This is ever expanding permission of whoever can, of individuals who could hold power, who can vote, etc. So I don't know, it's a really fascinating topic. I think in a society that would be ordered where the family is as we have it, I would prefer...
then it's not necessary for the women to vote.
I don't think
because
so.
They would be represented by both, in the head of the household.
Yeah. So that's clearly not the case in today's society, so you wouldn't want to come in and say, well, women shouldn't have the right to vote. Because it's the workforce is double now. Yeah. Women are just as much in the workforce as men are.
I find myself very disappointed in lots of women in power, in government.
More than the men in power?
Maybe, yeah. On average, if you see what kind of decisions women are making, those who have power, versus the men who are in power, and what kind of decisions they're making, it seems like the women are easily swayed by Marxist ideas,
by sort of victimhood,
death culture,
right?
by victimhood culture. So that recent judge that said that
a disabled woman who's
mother,
pregnant
with a 22-week-old, had to abort, was sentenced to abort the baby against the mother's wishes. And that's really
at the same
sad.
time, though, it was 9 Supreme Court justices that passed Roe versus Wade in the States.
Yeah, they were guilty of that. Yeah, the men.
Yeah.
But there were how many women were there?
There were none.
Back then? Yeah. So I'm talking about proportion of male to female, and then within the male sex, what they're doing, and within the female sex, what they're doing.
Okay.
I find that more women are on the liberal agenda.
Yeah. I mean, that would be by definition, right? Because if you're a woman in authority, you're there by virtue of the liberal agenda.
Yeah. It seems weird to me that a female judge would judge that.
Yeah. But it was cool seeing the regalia and the uniforms worn in... that's still Victorian. I think that's still a Victorian period. That's like late Victorian, what we've seen. That's really impressive.
Yeah. What people wear today on the streets is just so different than they used to. It used to be like a formal thing. You looked if you were going outside your home, you looked the part. Whereas now we're just inside, outside, whatever. You just wear whatever.
If I were to to identify the single thing that has been sort of made an idol in British culture of a value and been exaggerated and taken to the extreme is the idea of not offending. And so as it applies to dress, I would say you don't want to dress well because you don't want to make it seem like those who are not dressed well are less and are therefore offended.
Really?
I would suggest, that it's an effort to not stand out.
Are you
So it's
thinking
okay
of
to
the
be-
moments where people have apologized for dressing up?
Yeah.
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 Where they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm wearing this suit because I have to go to a christening later. Like, that's why I'm in this. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's this idea. See, what is the root of the idea of not to offend? It's the idea to blend in. To blend in with everyone so that no one feels
why would
different.
that be a value?
I think it comes from a corruption of a good value, which is to be considerate of people. But I think you can take being considerate of people to the extreme. And to such an extreme that you value uniformity above all else.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's
They value
Victorian
uniformity.
British. I think that is...
No, definitely not. Yeah.
I think that's late 20th, 21st century British.
And that's what we have today, where girls and boys, they think that they should actually wear exactly the same clothes at school, because I think there's still a distinction in most schools right now. Skirts for the girls, trousers for boys, but there's more and more like uproar about that being unfair and that they should just make everyone wear trousers.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment below and definitely leave us some links that we should react to.
And support us and what we do by becoming a patron at patreon.com/thepostmodernfamily. Every pound counts. And you can support us by just buying t-shirts at teespring.com/stores/the-postmodern-family. And
we just came out with some music on iTunes. I did a concert, and there are 2 albums. The first one is British patriotic music, and the second one is French music. So if you went on there and searched Postmodern Family, you'll be able to find us. We can put some links down below as well. We're also on Spotify, Google Play, all of the online music stores. Thanks for watching.
bye.
Bye.